Sony 70-200 F2.8 GM2 on Sony APS-C. This is A6600.
Please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.
If you want the shortest review ever, I'd say it is amazing. One of the best lenses, or the best lens I've ever used. And for sure it's the best 70-200 I've ever used, and I already used two Canons, Sigma and Tamron, on several bodies, and this one is for sure the best of them all, and I'd say this is one of the best lenses I've ever used, and I used plenty, I guess 50 plus. It's amazing. It is very light, it got all the bells and whistles you want. The autofocus is blazingly fast. I think it's the fastest I've ever seen, even on this Sony APS-C. And if you want detailed review, let's dig in. The disclaimer: I have rented this lens with my own money. I paid around 150 bucks for 3 days of the rent time. I have rented this to see if this works fine with Sony APS-C and especially with my A6600, to be sure if it's worth buying in the future. So this is not sponsored review, no one paid me to say anything. I just wanted to test it to see if it is worth buying, and that's it. And I would like to share the results to help everyone make that decision. First, physical appearance. So it is 20 centimeters long and weighs 1154 grams without both rear and front cap, but with the UV filter on, which I'm not allowed to take off because this is the rental lens. And together with my A6600 body and the hood on, it is 1830 grams, which is less than Sigma 70-200 F2.8 EF mount alone. So this lens, together with A6600 body, small rig hot shoe relocator, battery and SD card, weighs less than Sigma 70-200 F2.8 EF mount. And for the EF mount lens, I need also either Metabones speed booster or MC11 from Sigma. This is additional 200 grams. So actually the lens, to be ready to be used with E-mount, weighs like 10% more than the whole combo with this one. And this feels really light. When I first got this into my hand, I was really surprised how light it is. And of course, I've been shooting in some scenarios handheld when before I had to use tripod and a gimbal head. So in the weight department, this is really, really amazing. To put this into the perspective, this is how it compares to my Frankenstein 70-200 F2.8. This is Canon 70-200 F4, but with the Metabones on it. So actually it is almost the same length, and this weighs 1066 grams, but without the lens collar and the fit, and with the fit it weighs 1189 grams. So actually it is heavier than this one, and regarding the size, it seems this one is quite fatter, but generally in hand this feels heavier for some reason, maybe because it's made of metal, I don't know, but more or less they are the same. When you pick this one, it seems heavier, maybe because how the weight is distributed, but this one is really, really, really light compared to anything else. So real deal 70-200, just above 1 kilogram. So what is the physical feel of this lens? It seems like it's all built from some kind of plastic. Seems to be a really robust one, although the collar from the feet seems to be metal because it's cold to the touch. The rest is not cold to the touch, so it seems everything else is from the high quality compound. And it got really, really pristine feel to it. It doesn't feel cheap. I'd say the opposite. It feels like it's an expensive lens, and it got this professional feel, I'd say, like all other 70-200 F2.8s, and it got all the bells and whistles. So actually it got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 switches, but those 3 are just the same switch, but located in a different place. And also it got manual aperture ring, so Actually, everything you would like to have in 70-200, it got it. So going from the top, there is autofocus, manual focus switch, full-time DMF. I turned it off, but if you want to use it in some scenarios, it's very, very useful. It's better to have the switch on the lens than have it programmed on the custom button in the camera. Then there is a range, so you can have full autofocus range or 3 meters to infinity. Then optical image stabilization with 3 modes. Then iris lock and the iris click the click. And if you unlock the iris and you got the click mode, so first step to move from automatic to F22 is quite hard, and then it is a bit looser. So it's, I guess it's not that easy to, even if it's not locked, to push it above auto setting, because to move from auto setting you have to press quite hard and then it moves a bit lighter. And of course for video work you can declick it and then you got smooth movement of the aperture ring, although from 22 to automatic there is this hard click, so I'd say it's quite nice. Although I haven't used this as a video lens too much, I just shot like maybe 2 minutes of video footage because I'm more interested of the photo side of this lens, but seems that image stabilization for video is also quite nice. But I checked some video features of the lens, like if this is parfocal or if there is a focus breathing. Anyway, back to the physical specs. Really light, really good quality of the build, but there is one caveat. Sony page says that this is only dust and moisture resistant, it's not waterproof, so you cannot get this into harsh weather because it's not fully element and weatherproofed. And I've been surprised because I thought this is the professional lens, which should be together with the body weatherproofed. It seems not. So you have to be aware if you want to use this in harsh environment that this is not the case. So this is only dust and moisture resistant. If you want to get this lighter, you can also detach the feet, but you cannot detach the ring itself. And actually, I guess that's it regarding the physical abilities. But the size and weight of it is just, I'd say, just really impressive. And it might be one of the reasons either to upgrade or buy this one instead of any other 70-200 for E-mount. So actually using this lens on APS-C sensor is quite challenging for the lens, because to render the photos you are using smaller area of the optical elements, but you use the higher density of photocells on your sensor. So Sony APS-C is more or less as demanding as A7R4, because that's the pixel density of the Sony APS-C sensor. Which means if you got sharp photos on APS-C, you would get sharp photos on any existing Sony camera. And regarding the focus, also quite important thing that is 0.4 meters / 1.3 feet, the minimum focus on 70 end, and it is 82 centimeters less than 3 feet for 200 end. So also the focus limit is quite nice. You can focus closer than usual for such lenses. Some of them even got like 1.2 meters limitation of the focus, so it is quite good in that department also. So really nice. And also regarding the physical design, you got the hole here to adjust your circular filters, which is also a really nice feature. Also quite important thing, it's compatible with both focal extenders, so 1.4 and 2x. So we can have this as 70-400, although with 2x converter it becomes 5.6, but this is on the full frame camera. And on Sony APS-C, this is actually around 105 millimeters to 300 millimeters, and equivalent or more or less f4, if you do not use any speed booster. I'm not sure if there is any E-mount to E-mount speed booster on the market. But anyway, I've been surprised how good the photos are, and all examples in the video are just JPEGs from the camera. I wanted to show how it renders the photos with default settings, so there is no picture profile. And I'd say straight from the camera, the photos are amazing. And I also shoot RAW. So I'm not showing any processed photos to show how this looks straight from the camera. For me, the most important thing was how good the autofocus is. And regarding the autofocus, I must say, this is amazing. I think it's the fastest autofocus I've ever seen. And even on Sony A6600, it is blazingly fast. Although there are maybe few complaints, but I will discuss this in a second. So regarding the autofocus, I've shot few tests for the autofocus, especially the most demanding one was that someone was running into the camera, and I've been taking sequential shots with high setting of A6600, which is 9 frames per second. And actually that might be my only complaint, that it haven't got the eye every time in focus, although maybe I'm too demanding. Yet most of the photos were in focus, but when I checked when the autofocus has been, it was not on the eye, but it was sometimes on the face of the subject and sometimes on the jacket, and it depends on the scenarios, because I've done it in several scenarios in more or less controlled environment. For example, we've been in the forest and my daughter was running towards me. She got really deep head, so basically her eye, almost half of her eyes has been covered, and she also got a really tall scarf, so camera haven't even recognized the face, so was rather focusing on the jacket than on the face. But then when she got closer, then it recognized the face and focused on the face or the eye. And also everything happened in the snow, so from one hand you can say it was quite contrasty, but shooting on snow is also quite demanding for the camera and the lens. So the scenario actually has been the hardest for the autofocus system, and I got my A600 set to autofocus priority. It takes a photo only when it thinks that the subject is in focus. And then we got several tests which I recorded with Atomos when we ran in our backyard into the lens, and they were more or less in focus, but not every photo taken got eye in the focus. When I checked on the camera, some of them got face as a point of focus. So it seemed that at least on A6600, autofocus was able to keep up with fast moving objects toward the camera. So that's, I guess, my only complaint, but this is quite hard scenario, especially that I was again wearing a hat, and my kid was also wearing a quite deep hat when we tested this. So that's been a bit confusing for the autofocus system of A600, and I guess for flagship cameras at the moment, they got better autofocus like A1 or A74. So I guess it shouldn't be a problem, or maybe I made some mistake during this test. I'm not sure, but I'd say not all pictures got focus on the eye, but most of them were in focus anyway, until I was like half a meter from the camera, then it loses focus. Let's see how it goes. I think it's on my eye, it's hard to say. It's 200 millimeters, which is 300. Okay. I'm running fast. Now 70 millimeters, so I can be closer. But I'm not pressing the focus button on my remote. That's why I'm out of focus sometimes. So I'm not sure. And it also might be the case that it's focusing slower because it's recording to the HDMI, but I'm not sure. Anyway, let's kick in on 70. So regarding the autofocus when I'm running into the camera, Atomos was not connected, the only camera been shooting photos, and I'm running towards the camera. It's at 70 millimeters, and you can see that most of the photos are in focus. Yeah, it's in focus. This one more or less in focus, but slightly out of focus. All at 1/500 of the second, so maybe shutter speed was not fast enough, and that's why there is some kind of the blur. Hard to say. That might be the reason. This is slightly out of focus. Maybe the focus was here, but when I checked the photos on the camera, the focus generally been all over the place, so on the face, not on the eye but on the face. This seems to be in focus, probably in focus. So 200 millimeters. It seems I'm in most cases in focus, although also the focusing point has been jumping all over the place. This one is out of focus for sure. This more or less in focus, out of focus. So when I get closer, it cannot keep up. But some of these are also a bit out of focus, but might be the case that this is user error, because maybe shutter speed was not fast enough. This seems to be out of focus. Maybe that's just my face, because my eyes are quite deep into the face, and especially when there is a bright light, so I squinched. It is not that bad. Most of the photos are in focus or just slightly out of focus, but focus has not always been on the eye. It is more or less on the face when you check on the camera, because when you zoom in, the camera shows the focus point on which actually the photo has been taken, and it's all over the face. Sometimes it's even on the jacket, but since the jacket was in the same plane of focus, then the face is still in focus, so wasn't that bad. Then my kid has been running towards the camera. I guess he's running a bit slower, although the shutter speed has been set there. It was the aperture priority, so the shutter speed has been between 1/500 down to 1/300. So for sure, for some photos the focus is missed, especially when you approach the camera, and also when I checked on the camera, some of the photos, or for some photos, the focus has been all over the place, not on the eye exactly. This is out of focus, this is out of focus, out of focus. So this is at 200. So it's not that on A6600 the autofocus is spot on the eye, but it's not that bad, especially that this is the hardest test you can imagine for the lens and camera combo. So somewhere out of focus, somewhere in focus. It's like, seems focus to be spot on. This is a bit out of focus, but might be the case that he just moved his head, and for sure the hand is moving, so maybe the shutter speed been too slow. I don't have the lens anymore to repeat the test, but it also seemed on the screen and on the recording from Atomos that the focusing point is moving all over the place. It's not always on the eyes. That means, and especially when you approach the camera, then it cannot keep up. Anyway, any other situation, the autofocus has been really fast and sharp, so that's the only test I say it failed. And regarding autofocus, I also checked how good the autofocus is when shooting outside. So I got two small targets set up quite far from one another and checked how the focus is, and it's like blazingly fast. It just locks within half a second or maybe even faster. I also checked in the quite dark room, not the kind of the dark room you think, and both with wide open and f8, and the autofocus struggled a bit at f8 and beyond, but it was still quite fast, and the wide open it is just blazingly fast, and I guess in most cases in dark scenarios you would shoot it wide open anyway. So really fast, and there is a recording from Atomos now. Focus breathing, there unfortunately there is some focus breathing, really small, well controlled, but it's there. So I guess with A7 IV you just don't care about it because there is a focus breathing compensation in the body, and I guess A1 would get this in the firmware update, so probably not very relevant. I wonder about the FX series and A7S III, they probably would get this too, because it seems they got powerful enough processors to have it. Okay, focused breathing test at 70mm. Aperture set to 22, and I'm moving focus ring manually to the infinity and beyond. Maybe there is some small amount, but it might be the case that it is just out of focus and becomes bigger. But when you look at the edge of the frame, it seems that this branch disappears at the right top, and the window is getting closer to the edge, so there is some focus breathing, quite small, but there is, although on A7 IV it would be mitigated with the anti-focus breathing thing, and at 200mm if there is something, it is really minimal. Yeah, I can see that some log disappears when I'm focusing closer, and they come back into the frame when I'm focusing further. So there is some small focus breathing, but it is quite controlled. Is it parfocal? I think yes. I got some doubts at the beginning, but then I checked it a few times manually, and it seems it's parfocal. So if you focus on any focal length, then you change the focal length, your subject stays in focus. Maybe it's not very relevant for this lens because you would use autofocus anyway, but it's, I think, really nice to have in the lens if you would shoot this manually, for example on FX camera. Maybe you would if you do some professional work. So regarding the autofocus, my only complaint is that with A6600, if someone is running towards the camera, it does not keep with the eye on the face on all the photos taken in serial mode, but generally autofocus is really fast and snappy, and this is I think the fastest I've seen. So I think that's the limitation of A6600 regarding the keeping the target in focus when the target is running towards the camera, because I've seen the test on full frame cameras that most of the photos are in focus. I got like 3 days to test it, and we got few sessions, so we've been a bit limited with the time because of the real life issues, but I've shot some birds from a height in my backyard, and the resolution and the photo quality is stunning, even just straight from the camera. It is stunning. Although there was one problem: when I turned on the animal eye autofocus, my camera thought that some pattern on the stump was an eye. I was trying to focus there, so that was quite annoying. So I have to turn off the animal eye autofocus. So some of the photos, because when you shoot animal, you should have focus on the eye. But since I've been shooting small birds from around 3 meters, maybe 3-4 meters, the problem was that the depth of field was really shallow when I've been shooting wide open, and when animal eye autofocus has been turned on, the body together with the lens, the compo decided to focus on the feathers. So sometimes the eye and the head has been out of focus, but generally the quality of the photos were amazing. It's like a few classes better than either 200 to 600 or 150 to 600 from Sigma. It's just stunning. Generally the results were really amazing when shooting small birds, but there were some problems with the eye autofocus, but it seems, but it's not the lens fault, but rather the body fault, so not related to the lens. And regarding the resolving power, you can see the single feathers. It was shot down from around 4 meters at 200, and you can see how detailed it is. You can zoom in, it is like almost 200% zoom in, and you can see every single hair on these sparrow feathers. So it's, I'd say it's really amazing, because especially this APS-C sensor is quite demanding. It is more or less the same as sensor on A7R4 regarding the pixel density and pixel size actually. So you can expect the same results from high resolution pixels, which means it is very, very good. And this photo, so it was taken from the eye level at 70 millimeters, so not that much of the zoom in the lens, and this is just a bug on the snow, but when you zoom in you can see all the hair on his legs. It goes beyond the capabilities of this JPEG compression, so no, it's falling apart because it's compressed as a JPEG, but you can see the single hair on this bug. This bug is like half an inch, so around 12 millimeters, the whole body, and so this was a really small bug, so actually your eyes see this, but when you zoom in you can see that resolving power of this lens is really, really good. So actually very impressive. Then when I got eye autofocus turned on, you can see that the camera thought this is some kind of the eye and was focusing here instead of the actual subject, so that was kind of annoying, but it's rather the problem with the body, not with the lens itself. So, and also A6600 does not have bird eye autofocus. It works to some extent, but maybe in this case it couldn't keep up, hard to say, but it thought this is the eye, so that's why this is out of focus. Then when I turn off eye autofocus, you can see that this photo is focused on the feathers. I used the flexible spot large, and the camera thought that should focus on the feathers, and yes, the feathers are the resolution here and the resolving power is really amazing, but and actually you should have the eye in the focus to say that this photo is successful. So due to how the autofocus works with this combo, this is actually autofocus is a bad photo, but when the autofocus works good, then you can see that everything is fine and is very, very sharp. like here, this spot on the eye. So this again, really good resolving power, and autofocus is spot on the subject. Here the same, you can see the reflection in the eye of the surroundings. That's impressive. All these photos are just JPEG straight from the camera, just to show what is the starting point, and none of these photos were processed. So you can see the single feathers here, and this is the teeth, which is a really small bird. So yes, this, I'd say this is a really sharp lens. It is shot wide open, so you can see this, you can see the lens is very sharp, even wide open, and everything is very impressive. Then we went with my daughter to the snowy forest, and we were just snapping photos. Some of the photos were quite cheesy, in terms that everyone shoots with 200 when your subject is in the middle of the road, and 200 creates this compression effect, and it seems like you are sucked into the tunnel or something like that. So we got few of such photos. We also got some photos with nice snowy bushes and stuff like that, and that's why I would like to have 70-200, because 200 F2.8 creates this really nice separation between the subjects and the background. So I'd say it's sometimes look magical straight from the camera in the JPEG format, so you don't have to even process the photo to have really nice result from this. So actually I've been very positively surprised how good the photos are, and they are really sharp, wide open. There were some problems with autofocus when my daughter was running towards me. We've done the test twice, and it seems that sometimes lens chosen to focus on the jacket than on the face, but the face has been half covered with the scarf and the hat. So that's, and also this is rather the problem with the body than the lens. So I wonder how that would be on the full frame camera with one of the newest firmwares and more processing power. Hard to say, but generally all photos, even if my daughter has been moving, were in focus and were really sharp, wide open, and some of them were just like really magical. Even though we were just snapping some shots, it was not a photographic session we prepared, but we just went there and shoot some photos. Yes, I tried to get a good composition, but it was nothing prepared, and we've been maybe once to this location, and so we couldn't plan very much, and also since there was snow, the location was different than usual. And here it's just straight from the camera. It's quite a cheesy setting that you got this tunnel from the trees, and you can see how this 200mm creates the pop of the subject, and again, these are JPEG straight from the camera, no corrections made in post. So even straight from the camera, I'd say this is quite impressive. And this is just snapshots in the forest, in the snowy forest. And here also you can see the destruction of the background, and autofocus is actually on the eye. So even with A6600 and probably any Sony APS-C, you can get really nice results. Again, this shot, and here my UV filter been a bit foggy, that's why you see that maybe it seems a little bit soft, but this is because we've been moving between outside and inside, and the filter been getting foggy. But anyway, results are very impressive. This is spot on the eye, so very nice results, and I'm actually debating buying this lens this month if this is available. Impressive results just straight from the camera, and I also shoot RAWs, so I got plenty of room to level up all these photos, but those are just the results straight from the camera. So I'd say this is very impressive lens, so fully recommended. Then we went with the slides to the moving target to shoot, and again it was 4 p.m, quite dark, and my daughter has been still wearing a cap and a scarf, so body couldn't find the knife from 2 reasons or 3 reasons. It was dark, it was the face was quite far away, and also there was this cap and scarf, so it rather chosen to focus on part of the jacket or on the shoes, because shoes were dark, so they were quite contrasty against the snow. So generally autofocus kept track with this fast moving object which has been moving towards me, so the slide going from the hill, but it was not focusing on the eye. So most of photos were in focus, but it was also, they were also in focus because depth of field and the plane of focus was quite deep, because my daughter has been quite far away. But then when she come closer, also she was in focus, and when she got really close, then the eyes were recognized. So maybe I'm demanding too much from this combo from this camera and lens combo, I don't know. Then regarding the image stabilization, 1/15 of the second, maybe a little bit shaken. This is again the same shutter speed, maybe a bit soft because of the shake. Well, actually I've been on, and this is 1/10 of the second, really dark conditions, just a lamp over the table. This one is shaken, 1/5 of the second. It doesn't seem bad, and this is half of the second, and this seems to be very sharp. Like you can see every single hair on this teddy bear. So that means you got at least 6 stops of image stabilization, and in this case it's like 7.5 in case of this photo. So quite impressive, and this is a 200mm f4, so I'd say the image stabilization is also very impressive. Then I got the lens close to the highway and shot some panning shots of the moving cars. I mean, I like shooting panning shots, but that was the closest highway I got. The scenery is not that amazing, although you can see that some of the photos are really good in focus, and the camera haven't got any problem keeping moving subjects in focus. And I've been shooting at between f8 and f11, so quite dark, and it was not very and the day was not very bright because we got winter here in Poland, and there was basically no sun, but there was no problem with having the subjects in focus. Of course, the shooting panning shots is not that easy, so if you got 10% of photos in focus and not shaken, then you got like a professional ratio. I'm not sure how much I got in focus, but I guess probably around 10%. I'm not sure exactly, but there, the photos which were in focus, they were like really sharp, and I tried 100 of the second and 1/60 of the second, and maybe something between. So below 100 of the second, the panning shots are quite tricky, so the results I say were very good. And also you got special image stabilization mode number 2 for panning shots, which is very helpful. So in that regard, for sure it's better than adopted Sigma and most of the lenses I shot before. Although my Tamron, both on Sony APS-C via MC11 and or Canon body, yeah, similar results. So it's not that this is just like better than anything else, but also because this is very light, it was much easier to shoot. Since there was a fence around the highway, I had to just climb my car, and I was standing inside doors of my car and shooting, like leaning forward on my roof, so it was quite challenging pose, but since the lens is really light and together with the body is less than 2 kilos, it was not a problem. I've been able to shoot like 50 photos without having any sweat, so really nice. Then image stabilization for the pans. I got like 4 pictures which are in really good focus. You can read all these letters. Maybe this one is just slightly out of focus, but they are tricky. I got 54 pictures and 4 of them I consider they are in great focus. So these 4, like you can see the people there. So, and actually the car is sharp. Most of them is 100 of the second. This seems to be very sharp, although maybe you can see a small movement here, but when it is zoom out it seems razor sharp, and you got this effect of the blur of the background because that's the panning shot. So also image stabilization is impressive for pans, and especially that I've been shooting this in a really weird position, leaning on my car, because I had to be above the fence which was in front of me. So again, image stabilization impressive for the pans. And I haven't got any of the photos I shoot not sharp due to shake. I missed some focus due to the reason that I said about before, but none of the shots been unstable because the stabilization was not enough. My 9-year-old kid tried to shoot with it, and yes, some of his photos were not sharp due to his shaky hands because it's too heavy for him, but generally I haven't experienced any problems with the stabilization. But it was paired with the IBIS of A6600, which is quite lame anyway, but seems that stabilization is really good here. So also probably it works better because the lens is quite light. One thing about it, when the stabilization is engaged, you can hear very low, but still it's audible sound of the stabilization, but it's not like in terms of Canon stabilization that you hear that something is grinding like some mechanical elements, but it's rather like the stabilization engine. This is rather the sound connected with the electronic coil. It's like the engine is creating that quite high noise when this is engaged, the electric engine. So it's probably more of the sound in the coil of the engine than something mechanical. But there is something, but it's really quiet. So you can hear it only if you're in a quiet room. You won't hear it whenever you are outside. Even when I was shooting my bird photos in a height, it was quite quiet, but I couldn't hear it. But when it's totally quiet, you can hear the sound related to the stabilization, because when the stabilization is off, that sound does not appear. Also, one quite important thing, that the bokeh produced by this lens is smooth and nice. I haven't checked the specular highlights. Generally, all the photos I have taken got really smooth and very pleasing bokeh. So in that regard, it is also a very good lens. And in case you're wondering, and this is the size with the hood attached the opposite way, and if you wonder, this is the PeakDesign 5-liter sling, and you can get this, although I think you won't be able to put the lens attached to the body, but you can put the lens and the body on top of it, no problem. But there's plenty of room to put also full frame body or even 2 bodies or additional lens and stuff like that. So that's also a plus. It's really small. So when I've been shooting birds from the height, usually I use tripod with a gimbal head, and this time I shot it handheld, and I must say it was a pleasure to shoot with such lens. Of course, my smaller combo is lighter, the Micro Four Thirds combo, but the quality of these pictures are like 10 or 100 times better. So I've been able to shoot like for half or maybe 1 hour having this handheld, and I haven't felt anything. That's a really big pro of this lens, because when you shoot on the tripod, you are quite limited to the position of the tripod, and you can just move the lens towards some subjects. And when you keep this handheld, it's much more flexible to shoot any moving subject, especially when you're shooting wildlife. So that's the really good pro here. Again, this lens at 200 at f2.8 creates really magical images. I guess it's the case with all 70-200s, but this got really fast autofocus, and it's really nice to handle handheld. So that's really a really good advantage of this lens. Maybe only one con of this lens is the price. Instead, this is around $2,800. In Poland, it's actually 3,400 because we got VAT, so we are unlucky here. And instead, Tamron 70-200 is now during the promo around $1,000, so it is like 2.8 times more expensive than Tamron. But Tamron does not have image stabilization. Tamron does not have manual aperture ring, does not have DMF. I think it doesn't have any switches on the body. And Tamron does not have image stabilization, but it's like 300 grams lighter than this. But it's also shorter, 180. So I'd say this is better choice, and I would choose this over Tamron any day. So I would rather prefer to save for this lens like a year to get 70-200 instead of Tamron. And Sigma, which is twice as heavy, is $1,500 in States. So almost half the price, but it's like this big and hefty and really heavy lens. So this, in my opinion, is much better. And Sigma for sure does not work good with A6600. I've tested it before via MC11, so it's not that this is a better choice in any regard. But regarding the price in Poland, if I want to buy this as a business expense, which I'm allowed to do so, I can get this for $2,300, but this is only till the end of this year, because next year there are different rules and I'm not allowed to do it. Is it worth buying? I say yes, and I guess this is my next and the only lens I'm gonna buy for my EMAL system, because I already got them all, unless I switch to full frame. But even though this is a full frame lens, so it got the best autofocus system at the moment for 70-200. So even with Sony APS-C, this is a really good choice, and I think it's the best choice regarding 70-200 at the moment. The only lens which might change this is upcoming Sigma, but I'm not sure the Sigma would have image stabilization. It's hard to say. And also not sure Sigma would be that sharp as this is. I guess only one con with this lens, it is white. Because when I'm shooting wildlife, and the white lens is actually no-go, especially for deers and small birds. They are scared of bright objects, so when you move the lens, they just flew away or run away. So you need a lens cover if you want to shoot any wildlife with that lens. But other than that, maybe not the best autofocus performance in really demanding scenarios on APS-C, but it's rather a fault of the body than the lens itself. And also the scenarios we've tested were quite demanding, and by not a good performance I mean that few shots of the 30 were out of focus. So it's not that it's terrible, but some shots are out of focus, or they are in focus but the focus point is not on the eye. So that's I'm very picky here. But again, it seems that this is the best lens I've ever tested, the sharpest one, the fastest autofocus, with all the bells and whistles. So I'd say it's highly recommended, and if you can afford it, you should buy this one instead of any 70-200 for Sony mount. All the pros of this lens is the physical size, so size and weight. Really good autofocus, like the best, I say the best on the market. Really good stabilization, really pleasing bokeh, really sharp. It's really sharp wide open. Aperture ring, which could be declicked. Quite small focus breathing. It's parfocal and got plenty of buttons. And the cons, I'd say the price. It's white, so might be annoying if you're shooting wildlife. And on A6600, the test, when the target was approaching the camera very fast, the autofocus couldn't keep up, but it's probably the autofocus of the camera, not the lens. And I'd say that's it. So there are like 100 pros and some cons because I'm very picky, but generally it is the best lens I've ever tested. As always, this is totally independent review. I got this from the rental house. I paid with my own money. It was 150 bucks for 3 days, quite expensive for the Polish conditions, although this lens is worth renting or buying, so actually well spent money. Cheers, mate.